I can't help but take serious offense against the idea of telling anyone that, hey, starting real estate as a side hustle is not going to be in a good plan. What are some bad habits keeping you from success? Maybe it's too much reading. Perhaps you are taking on too much at once. Maybe it's your, wanting to create an additional income source, or maybe you're overworking. And what about, let's toss in there, you're trying to take care of yourself before helping other people. Those are some bad habits according to Healthy Gamer in his recent video, 5 productivity pitfalls that you may be, part of. So Healthy Gamer came up with a new video that I couldn't possibly help but scream at the entire time that I was watching. About 20% into the video, I was just like, no, what? No, you can't, what? No. So I was basically arguing the entire time. So I decided to take my energy and channel it into something that is a bit more productive. So I'm creating this response video. But I will say the majority of the video is excellent. And I agree with a lot of his points. And in fact, the main thing that really kind of got me to a point where I was annoyed enough to want to create a response video is something that you're going to want to strap in for. So we'll talk about that here real soon. And so in this video, he talked about the 5 productivity pitfalls, and those pitfall habits happens to be, the first one is reading too many books, multitasking, having a side hustle, hustle culture in general, and lastly, but also mislabeled, is putting yourself first above all else. So this is the main premise, the motivation behind his initial video in the first place.
What I've noticed is that there are a lot of people out there who will give like productivity tips and talk about success. What I've really found is that a lot of the productivity tips that people give, sort of share, are actually more pitfalls than tips. And what I'd love to do is share with you all 5 of those that, in my opinion, are kind of like debates, okay? So let's start with number 1. Number 1 is reading a lot of books. So there's sort of this idea that if you read a lot of books, you will be more successful. What really leads to good outcomes is like practical application of theoretical concepts.
So that generally makes sense. He brings in a very interesting point that you may have known subconsciously, but he's forcing you to think about it and confront that point specifically.
So the real value of books is to sort of trigger an introspection. And as you go through that introspection, that's where the real yield comes from. I don't know that reading 100 books makes you 100 times better at life.
If I pick up a book regarding nuclear physics and I read that, does not mean that I can then go out and build a nuclear power plant or create a nuclear bomb, although that might be interesting. And of course, there's examples where you go to school for something. Let's say for myself, I was a trained nurse by profession. We didn't just talk about the theoretical aspects of nursing and taking care of people, but there's also hands-on clinicals and practicums that you actually have to go through to demonstrate what you learn in the classroom in practice. So you go to hospitals, skilled nursing facilities and things like that to actually demonstrate and learn just how to apply that and interact with other coworkers and patients and families, because there's different layers of learning that actually helps you solidify the concept. So that's all good and, whatever.
Is multitasking. So this is where we've got to be super careful, because generally speaking, a lot of people will value multitasking. They'll even take pride in sort of being able to do 1,000 different things at once. The issue though is that if you really look at the mind can literally only focus on one task at a time. The last time you took an exam, like you weren't working on 15 questions all at once, right? When you take an exam, you look at one question and you can only occupy one thing at a time. Generally speaking, we sort of value being able to juggle a bunch of things over focusing on one task. And if you literally look at the science of cognition, the brain can really only focus on one thing at a time.
So I tend to watch a lot of productivity videos on, just whether it's personal finance or real estate and whatever. I think a lot of those productivity videos, whether it's from Graham Stephan or, other different individuals, I can't name them right now. I haven't heard one advocate for doing a bunch of at the same time. A lot of them always say to specialize in one area, focus on one thing before you. So I'm not sure who in current 2022, 2020, and 2021, who's advocating for, hey, make sure you're doing 500 different things all at the same time. So I'm not sure where this one's coming. So it's like, in terms of like the value of this particular point here. So I'm just kind of like, I just kind of tuned out to this portion. And I think we know that our minds can literally focus on one thing. I think the detriment, where we actually see this actually happening, is a lot of employers will expect you to be working on 5 different things all at the same time. So I think this should be more like a consulting conversation that he should be having with employers, not so much of general public audience.
The next thing that I want to talk to you all about is having a side hustle. So when I hear a lot of these productivity people out there, these success gurus and stuff like that, they'll talk about having a side hustle.
So this is where the wheels fell off the bus for me. I was just like, what are you talking about? How could having a side hustle be a negative, bad habit or anti-productive habit to have? So I was really kind of like, all right, I'm bracing in. So this is really where I think things just kind of fell off, and I was just like, I literally stopped the video and then started, downloading it and splicing it apart to like prepare this response, because I did not agree with a lot of points in this particular section here. So let's dive in.
Got one particular kind of work that you do and something that you devote yourself to, and then you do something else on the side to bring in extra cash to kind of like, optimize your time throughout the week.
All right, so I don't think that anybody is starting a side hustle for the purpose of optimizing their time during the week. The reason why you start a side hustle is not to optimize your time. In fact, actually, you're quote unquote, I don't think you're wasting your time, but you are losing time. You're losing energy because you're now having 2 jobs. If you already have 2 jobs and then you're starting a side hustle, now you have 3 jobs. So I don't think you're optimizing your time. You're like taking on more because you somehow have made a calculation that your primary job, your primary kind of career path is not something that you want to stay within long term, and you want to quickly transition out of in a different path. So choosing a side hustle is a very conscious decision you make with the hope of having it replace your current primary hustle. So here already where kind of like I'm already like disagreeing and just
And generally speaking, I think side hustles are just a waste of time.
Side hustles are a waste of time. I don't think side hustles are a waste of time. You have made the value calculation that you want to start a side hustle, or you're thinking about starting a side hustle because you see the value that it holds, that it's going to be your escape from your primary hustle. No one has that. At least when you start your career, you don't have, mommy or daddy just kind of like, funding your existence. So you can choose to stop your primary hustle and say, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore for me. So I'm going to, just stop, figure out what I'm going to do and then start that completely from scratch. Typically there's a transition period where you're going back to school, to gain additional education, to start something new or to advance further. So really, going back to school while you're currently in the workforce is itself a side hustle, in my opinion, because you're planning on building something so you can kind of keep on moving forward in your career or in a new direction entirely. So saying it's a waste of time, no.
And you may say like, wait, why can you say that?
The other part too is I noticed he does a lot of just like, so I'm already kind of annoyed and just kind of frustrated and saying, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then couple it with a lot of hair gestures of just being super cool and like, all right, dude, we know you're blessed with luscious hair, okay? And some of us, okay, are starting to lose our hair. So please, forgive me if I'm a little annoyed about excessive this, So that's just me just being a little petty at this point. So I apologize. Let's continue.
And you may say like, wait, why can you say that? So if you look at what correlates with like median income, it generally speaking is going to be advancement in a particular field. So I'm a medical doctor, so I do advanced education and then I become a psychiatrist. Subspecialty training, generally speaking, improves your earning power. So what we tend to see is that in any given profession, rather than investing, let's say 20 hours a week in a completely different field, what's oftentimes much more useful is investing any extra time that you have in building what you kind of initially have a foundation on.
I mean, I disagree with that. Like, if you're at the point that you're thinking about creating a side hustle, it's likely that you are somewhat fed up with your current, vertical ladder of where you're going. You don't want to maybe continue in the same area. Typically when you're starting a side hustle, you are wanting an escape, an exit from the current trajectory that you're on and something entirely new. So he's saying that it's a waste of time. And then not just that, we should instead spend your efforts to double down on the current, vertical climb that you're going. You should double down on that. Is not necessarily, I think, the best advice to be giving here. And the reason why I say this is because, especially like right now in 2022, we are in the environment of quiet quitting, great resignation, right? Of COVID, where we have had some time to really kind of reflect on what is the value of life? How do we want to spend life? Do we want to be on our deathbed and look back and say, you know what? I'm glad I doubled down on the career that I absolutely hated, that was taking me away from my friends and family, that left me no time to be creative, to pursue my passions. And I dread every single day that I have to wake up super early in the morning, fight through traffic, go do something that, honestly, if we have a deep conversation about the value of the work you do, can be kind of summed up as a BS job. And then you come home, you're super late now, you hardly see your kids, your wife, your spouse, what have you. And then you rinse and repeat that, and you pray for Friday to come, and on Sunday nights you dread for Monday to start up. I would say that it's a complete, that's complete, right? And not to mention as well, we're also in an environment where college education is super expensive. It's increasingly more and more inflated, where employers expect you to get higher and higher degrees, and everybody else is getting higher and higher degrees, which means the value of that specific degree becomes that much more worthless because everybody has it. And then when you earn that degree, oftentimes you're not going to have a significant bump in pay. It's not always that going from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree will result in a higher income. So I've seen social workers with master's degree that unfortunately we couldn't compensate them more than what they typically are currently getting than compared to their average peers who only had a bachelor's.
I've talked to people who've gotten mediation certifications. I've worked with programmers who've learned additional programming languages as opposed to starting a real estate side hustle.
And I can't help but take serious offense against the idea of telling anyone that, hey, starting real estate as a side hustle is not going to be in a good plan. It's going to be in your best interest to instead focus solely on programming, learn 5,000 different programming languages, because that's going to help you, differentiate yourself in the market. Building real estate as a side hustle is always a great idea. So to him to suggest that real estate is somehow not going to be a good side hustle for anyone to pursue is ludicrous. And the reason why I take great offense to this one is because it is literally the sole means for which allowed me to be able to have the time luxury to pursue something else and not feel like I can't afford to pay for or support for my 4 kids. All right. So real estate is legit the greatest way to start any type of side hustle. So I'm quite aggrieved by the suggestion that, hey, real estate, it's not a good hustle. You better just keep on programming and learn, 10 additional programming languages. BS.
And if we think about the concept of a side hustle, I've got a foundation already that I'm building up on. And then now I'm going to start real estate over here, which then I'm going to start building from the ground up. And if you really look at the yields on a given hour of effort, higher up you go, the more you actually get from investing in that same kind of tower of a career. So I know that a lot of people will sort of emphasize side hustles and doing stuff on the side, but in my experience, it's been a lot better to just invest in what you're already doing and kind of like move from the 9th floor to the 10th floor instead of the first floor to the second floor over here.
Yeah, so moving from the 9th floor to the 10th floor is extremely exhausting, and it comes with, so like when I picture moving from the 9th floor to the 10th floor, oftentimes for me that's associated with like moving in terms of the level of responsibility. You go from being a manager to a director or to a partner or whatever else, like levels of leadership and seniority, you're just kind of hopping up. And what he doesn't mention here is that those positional moves from levels of responsibility comes with it working a lot of hours, a lot of stress, short deadlines, chaos, and fires happening all the time that you have to be running around putting out. That's going to result in shorter lifespan because you're at higher incidence of stroke, heart attacks, or any number of adverse negative health effects, gaining weight and all these things, all because there's a lot of associated stress and pain that comes with those additional dollar increments that you earn. Whereas if you build a side hustle and you work it according to a plan, you have support from your families, friends, and what have you, or maybe you're already super skilled and it comes easy to you, you have a better chance to live a strong quality of life compared to all that chaos and stress that you may take on. In addition, you're building something that is often owned by someone else, i.e. a corporation, a company, who will suck your soul, right? And your time, your creativity. And as soon as you are unable to keep performing at that, like, seriously, like, accelerated rate of performance because you're already like a go-getter, as soon as you just slightly fall back, they will notice and you'll be quickly exited through the door. And therefore your income ceases. Whereas if you spend that same amount of energy and intensity within your personal business or your side hustle and you perform well and that picks off, then there's a potential that that side income that you've created, that hustle that you've created, could pay you perpetually, whether you work or not work. And that's particularly the case when it comes to real estate. Whereas if you have several pieces of rental property, as long as those are rented, you don't have to lift an additional dime other than to just find tenants to, be in that location and pay you rent each and every single month perpetuity. So, just have to say that. But at the same time, here's where things just further start to kind of fall off the rails and highlight some hypocrisy. So watch out for this hypocrisy coming up soon.
Now, there's an important caveat here, which is that even Healthy Gamer was a side hustle for me. So I'm not saying that side hustles don't have a place. But that, once again, I think the real place for a side hustle is that if you've got a particular career and you want to make a transition, this isn't something that's forever going to be a side hustle. The goal is to try to do something that you can transition into. Oftentimes, that's something where you can't really abandon one career and jump directly from one boat to another. This is where you've got to invest a little bit on the side and start to develop something. And as something grows, you kind of scale back.
Isn't that is literally the point of all side hustles? That no one starts a side hustle to say, I'm just going to do this on the side and not have it forever take over my primary source of income. Generally, people start side hustles with the idea that it will become their main gig, right? So they'll use that to kind of feed them forever. and they can scale back from their primary source of income. And that's exactly what he did here.
And this is something that I've tried to do a lot at Healthy Gamer, which is not have a full-time job and then Healthy Gamer on top. So as Healthy Gamer began to grow, I actually cut back on my private practice hours.
Well, obviously you're going to cut back, yes.
Like 20 hours a week and then 10 hours a week and then 5 hours a week. And so I'd be super careful about the idea that a side hustle is better than just investing in what you're already building.
Dude is a doctor, right? So presumably he's making good money. You know, I'm assuming his loans are paid off or whatever. But generally, in terms of the salary, if he's able to save well and ration, whatever, he can afford to live a comfortable lifestyle once everything is nice and taken care of. And so even at that salary scale, he decides to go ahead and start a side hustle. And I'm presuming with the number of subscribers he has and the channel views he has, he's making decent money from it. And he very much admits that he has scaled back in terms of the hours that he's working at his primary gig as a, doctor, psychiatrist, I believe. And so, like, what are you doing here? You're completely talking against what it is that you've done yourself that you find valuable, which is running this channel, which is great, and I applaud you for it. Just don't discourage other people by saying, you know what, yeah, this is actually not great. It's, it's a pitfall. Like, what? This is really where, like, I was so annoyed from the video that I had to just kind of stop, dissect it, and say, hey, you know what, this actually is not the best advice to be putting out there for people, because he's arguing against his own position and just kind of like glossing over it and under the guise of, you know what, I'm being unique and counterintuitive and interesting, like, while at the same time very much, have you checked out my hair? It's, it's great, isn't it? Like, what the fuck, man? Yeah, I'm just quite upset about this. So that's why I had to create this video response. I could go on for the rest of it. But I really did not want to. So he's got some other interesting point in the rest of the video, and I did finish it. But for this purpose of this video, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. But I am interested in what you think. Am I wrong in my outrage of a lot of the content we said, especially around the idea of side hustles? Or am I missing something, or just kind of taking this, blowing it out of the waters? So let me know in the comments below.
I would encourage y'all to be a little bit more critical about some of these truisms of productivity or success.
All in all, what I did try to do is just be a little bit more critical, like he said. And so in my criticism, it brought me to this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please subscribe. It helps support the channel. And definitely give me a like if you enjoyed the video and made it this far. But until then, I'll talk to you next time.